Hey friends, welcome back to the Gentle and Lowly podcast. My name's Addie, your host, and today we will be talking about conversations with God. And if this goes well, we will have an episode on YouTube and we'll get to see you, which is awesome. And so, like I said, today I do have a guest, and her name is Becki Jean Graves, and she's my new friend. And so welcome, Becki.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. This is really fun. And so first, just to jump into our episode, can you just share a little bit about who you are and what this current season of life looks like for you?
Who I am? So I'm Becki. I am a mom to a 3-year-old. I have a husband for 6 years. We live in the South Bend area. We are refurbishing our house that was built in the 70s. So super fun, a lot of work, but a little chaotic. Seems to be a theme. The chaos is a theme. Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So I guess like background, I was in worship ministry for probably 10 years. I've always been someone who loves music, singing, acting, theater, all of it. So I found a calling in the church that combined creative and fine arts. And a lot of life has happened since that happened, since that calling, but it still remains. And I direct the worship arts program at Bethel University. Love the students that are training to be in ministry and do the thing. So, and then what is this season like for me right now? Full and tiring, but also really wonderful at the same time. You'll probably hear a lot of themes of that throughout this podcast. Many things at once. Life feels very full, but it feels like through years and years of wanting to see what my life would be, seasons of waiting, and I feel like I'm living in it and being like, wow, okay, well, I needed those seasons to get here for sure. So that's my long answer. Yeah.
I feel like that's like a foreshadowing of what we're going to get into.
I think so too.
Which is good. I'm excited about that.
Same.
But first, we just have a couple like fun segments. And I think this is perfect because your worship, music. So this should be easy, but also maybe hard for you.
Yeah.
So this is like a new segment for the year, kind of shifted things around, but it's just music of the week. And so just think about the different songs, or like even like a theme of certain songs. They kind of stood out to you from last week. Think it'd be fun,
Yeah.
But does any come to mind?
Yeah. This is a hard question for me, the music question. But
that's good.
I'll just say today and yesterday, my playlists have been informed by Usher because of the Super Bowl.
I love that.
And equally Maverick City and Amanda Cook.
Yes. Okay. Those are good.
And then some like cover funk bands. So
that's fun.
Pick the vibe.
Yeah.
Going for it.
That sounds like a good vibe, a good Monday. Yeah. I was thinking back to my week, and there's this one song I've like had on repeat, and I love the album cover too.
Yeah.
It's God is so good, but it's take you at your word.
Yeah.
Like, I'll take you at your word. And my church sings that quite a bit, and I'm like, it's so good.
So good.
But just like really meditating on the words, and I'm like, okay, this is good. But then some other themes of like Chris Renzema. Do you know who he is?
I sure do.
Him. So good. And then Gable Price and Friends.
I don't know them.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
What are they? Are they?
They're like Christian.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're kind of like Chris Renzema, but a little edgier.
Or like Ben Hastings.
Oh,
like that.
Yeah, kind of.
Like this cool singer-songwriter.
They're like toned up more.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. It's like, it's very cool.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, I don't know, I really like their lyrics, but they put it in a way that doesn't sound like Christian music.
Yep.
But the lyrics are still really impactful and deep.
Yep.
So it feels like you're listening to like a rock album or indie album. Yeah, but
this whole conversation is a whole other podcast.
I know. It is.
About like good music that doesn't sound like Christian music.
Yes, that is a whole thing. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But I was thinking about those kinds of songs, but it's really cool, like especially as creatives and really anyone, I feel like God uses music so much to speak to us, and that sometimes there's just like words that we can't express in music. It's just like the thing that we just need. And so that's why I think it's important.
With you.
But it's good. Okay. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, kind of digging a little deeper, it's going into the theme of the week. So if you look back at your week last week, whether it's full, whether it was slower, but I feel like we're both in a similar season where it's like going.
Yeah.
Just like, what was the theme that God maybe like put in that week? It can be as simple as you want it to be. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, even with, again, foreshadowing, like the book release that I have never done before. And I've just been like trying to process how I feel about people encountering this book.
Yep.
And it's very overwhelming and good. And then also just at work, I'm doing things I've never done before. And then being a parent is literally just figuring it out. So kind of the theme of last week, I felt like God was asking me to just say, like, what if you just saw it all as play? And what if instead of feeling so stretched thin, you know, like tightly wound band, like you're about to snap, what if it was something where it's like play and investigative and curious and more lighthearted and less performative? Which is, again, another theme. But that's kind of like what the theme of last week was. So I'm trying to hold that while still encountering the busy and the full. Yeah. So, it's perspective shift.
It's good. Yeah. It's just, changing that perspective of, instead of allowing yourself to be overwhelmed with maybe all the responsibilities you have to do, it's like, Lord's like, hey, like, Becki, like, look at what I've given you to steward. And maybe it's things you've been praying about, you know, for how many years. But I think that's really encouraging. And even if it is overwhelming for like the reasons like, oh, well, it's the first time doing this, it's like, it's okay. Like there's room for grace. And that perfectionism mindset, like it's really hard to let that go. It's
easy to give to others for me. I'm like, it's grace. But then for myself, I'm like held to this weirdly high standard. Like God expects more from me than other people. And it's just not true. But I'm like, yes, he does.
Okay, well, I'm curious. Do you like the Enneagram at all?
I love the Enneagram.
Okay, so what is it? What's yours?
Oh man, I wrestled for so long but they all are intertwined.
Yes, they all are. Yes.
I think the core wounding, that's why I love the Enneagram. The core wounding of the 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
With the wing 3.
Wing 3, okay.
But I would say the perception of the 2 is like, you know, the Mary, the servant, the helper, which is what it is, right? And I feel like I'm a lot more, you know, in the unhealth. Goes to the 8, a little more like feisty, aggressive. Okay. But also the 3 in there can be a little more confident. So I feel like I'm a 2 that doesn't fit with the 2.
Okay.
So
like an outlier.
Which is probably the whole point where I'm like, I don't like being this.
Right.
But I am this.
But you are.
I am this. What about you?
That makes sense. I was like, I felt like there has to be a 3 in there. So I'm a 2. Oh, no. Sorry. I'm a 4 wing 3.
Okay.
So like feeling things very deeply, very passionate about lots of things. And like, it's okay to like, I can't just like skip over my emotions or anything. Like I need to process them. And then the 3 side of me is like, I want to do things well. And it's hard if I don't do it right. Yeah. So
it's a fun mix, isn't it? Like feelings and performance.
Oh yeah. It's all intertwined.
Great.
So great. But it's good. It's a lot of fun. I think about this past week and it felt like a bigger shift of just, you know, when you're maybe coming out of different seasons. I really feel like the Lord confirmed, like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And just like, I mean, the simplest thing, but actually like being able to be a part of a small group. I mean, that sometimes takes time, especially like, you know, coming from different churches and just asking the Lord, like, am I supposed to be here? And it's been so cool to see like God was planting the seeds before that decision was even like a thought in my head. And it's just very confirming of like, oh, I'm supposed to be here. And these people just, they see me in a different way. And it's just really cool in that sense of like where it made me thankful for the Lord like making me walk in obedience when I did.
Yep.
Even though it's cost a lot.
Yep.
Which like that's hard to do, and if not everyone understands. But it's like, oh, the Lord was doing something, and I'm glad like I was obedient, but I didn't want to be at first. Different things, right. And so to see all that like falling together, it felt very significant. And where you're able to call your church, like the church you're going to, home again. Like that's a hard thing to do when you feel like you haven't been with a home. So it's a little more vulnerable than usual, but like it just felt like a very big week in that sense. Yeah. And I was like, oh wow, I'm so thankful for this body of believers that like I feel connected to now. Wow. So like that was huge. That was big.
That's huge.
So I was like, I couldn't not like, okay, that just kept coming up. So very, very, very thankful. But like that's why I kind of love shifting like the segments around, and like there's a theme in every single week, even if it's just getting to spend time with your family and like focusing on that mission. And if we're too busy, like just filled with the different things we have to do, which are good, but like we can miss what God's doing. And so it's just like slowing down and to do that. So like that's why I encourage even our friends, you know, to do the same thing. Which is good.
That's
just
so good.
Excited.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm very, very thankful for that, and excited just to like what this year can look like then with that. So it's really cool.
Love that. Love it.
Okay, so let's get into the main thing I'm really excited about. And like also I feel like this appreciation, also understanding of like writing a book and stuff. And so like I'm very, very excited. It's a big thing, but you did write a book.
I did.
It's so awesome. And it's called I Don't Know God, I Don't Know God, Conversations with God in the Chaos of Becoming Someone New. Okay, so like just give a little snapshot what that all is, like your pitch, I guess, because it's hard to do that, but we need to. So
the pitch.
Yeah.
Oh man, what this book encapsulates is kind of the last, I would say 5 years. There's a 7-year-old entry in there, but over the last 5 years, this is my personal journal. Talking to God while the chaos of life was happening to me, whether that was becoming a new mom, getting pregnant, 2020, just in general. Working in ministry, feeling the tension of, you know, when you start to grow out of something.
Right.
Figuring out when it's time to say goodbye while also being in leadership. And so there's a lot about ministry in there, and leaving and having that season end and finding God without all of my usual parameters around how I functioned in ministry and how God was with me in ministry, how that continued but also had to shift when everything changed. So, there's stuff about starting therapy, there's stuff about, you know, my daughter being in a big girl bed, just like it's kind of what you're talking about, just every part of life and how to find God in it. Even when you feel like you've lost him a little bit, because there is that, like, there's a theme of deconstruction and losing faith in people and maybe God, and kind of I found that not a lot of people like to talk about things in the middle when nothing makes sense.
That messy middle.
Yes. So I talk a lot about, like, I'm not here to put a bow tie on seasons or to say, I'm just starting to learn about this, you know, like I talk about not glorifying the bookends and talking about the middle. So that's what this book is about. It's about a lot, which is why I don't know how to like package it in this little.
But like that's kind of the heartbeat of the book.
Yes.
It's like it doesn't have to be all packaged perfectly.
Right.
And
that's
that.
the point, right?
Yeah, that's the point.
Because we can't package stuff up perfect. If we wait until we have things perfectly packaged, the lessons checked off, we know what God did because of this, I think it misses the point, and it hinders connection.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. Let's dive into, I guess, the question of just like, how do you get started with these honest conversations? Because I know I can have, you know, conversations with different friends or different people. I feel like it's even just in the world, sometimes having a conversation with God can feel overwhelming, especially those who haven't grown up in the church. It's like, wait, you talk to God? What does that look like? And then even like shifting that to honest conversations. Just describe like that kind of process of how God led you to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's been like a lifelong process. And I think everybody's going to have a different like mode for this. But I remember writing some things where it's like, dear God, thanks for sun, like starting like really, because you're taught
broad.
like be grateful first and then kind of funnel it
There's
down
that model.
to your request.
Yep.
And so I kind of started talking to him more like, God, it's 7:30 a.m. on a Monday. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And so from those conversations, it just spiraled, honestly, and it became the mode of like, God, what is happening? And then when I had my daughter, there's a total like ripping away of everything you knew in those first couple months. I couldn't rely really on anything besides keeping something alive. And so I just remember like crying and not even wanting to, but just crying.
Right.
And so I just had to start believing that that's prayer too, and that this is prayer, and that worship is prayer, and that my tears are prayer, my anger is prayer. So from the funnel that I talked about, the structure, it kind of has just expanded, and God has become, he's everywhere. He's omnipresent, right? We know that, but do we actually live and believe it and allow ourselves to receive that? So that's kind of where it started. But I will say like journaling and just treating it like a direct conversation that I'm sitting down with coffee. Like maybe God likes a dark roast.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Like I've never
probably
thought about that.
Yeah, right. But just this kind of
Yeah.
nearness, trusting that he's near, has shaped the entire thing.
Yeah. No, I really do love that, because sometimes I feel like you just, with the discipline of prayer, sometimes even like that language, a discipline of prayer, I love that book, Celebration of Discipline.
Yep.
That's so good, but sometimes it can feel like this structure, this order, we have to do it this certain way. And it's good to like have guides, to help us do that. But a big part of my story is just like talking to the Lord when I was in 6th grade, just like being in my bunk bed and just talking to him like he's my friend.
Yeah.
And being able to do that over time. It's like with any friendship, you just grow that depth. And the cool thing, and like the crazy thing too, is God already knows every single thing, but he still wants to sit there and listen.
Right.
And like we have, in all honesty, we have probably really good friends who do that for us, but the Lord is the truest friend and the kindest friend in that way. And like, he's a friend who's always there. And I just think like that's such good advice of just, just starting to write out your thoughts and to process them and not to shy away from the emotions. Even just this weekend, I went to a conference at my church and I loved it. It was one of the breakout sessions, and it's like not to have your emotions in the trunk, but I'm in the back seat.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's good.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I totally get that. But even, I think it was something else today, and it may be a podcast, I don't know, I listen to a lot of things, but it was the way you even like show your kids when you're mad or like you're upset, you're processing like, oh, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Then when your kids are teenagers, they're going to be, oh, just leave me alone, I don't want to talk about it. Yep. And that family turned the narrative of when I'm upset, like, hey, or like I've had a really hard day, hey, family, can you rally around me and pray for me? I was like, oh, now they have their teenagers saying, hey, Dad, I've had a hard day. Can you pray for me? And I'm like, whoo, like that is so different. And like such a beautiful representation of the gospel and like how Christ ministers to us, but especially like how the home is such a safe place and where you're loved, you're seen, and fully known for who you are. And so it's just so different. But like we can trust the Lord with our emotions and even those around us too, which is,
Yeah.
it's hard to do. It's hard to have those honest conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's vulnerable.
Yeah, it is.
That's the thing. I would rather do that with God than people, to be honest. Like, it's kind of hard to...
Sometimes it's harder
to extend that, right? Because I thought about this a lot, because I don't think, as I've looked back on writing the book, I even through all the crazy stuff, it was never like following God or loving God that was not on the table.
Yeah.
Like, he was always just this presence, but I was like, I don't know what to do with this part of it, like with faith or with church or community. Like, I don't know how to do that with all this stuff I have that you know about, that you care about. I don't know how to like take this safe place between God and I and trust people again.
Extend it.
Yeah. So that's been a very interesting thing to think through.
Yeah. That's good. I can sit with that for a little bit more, but we'll keep moving. You kind of talked about it, but really, because we talked about like what the purpose is of the book and what that message is, but why do you feel like it's important? Like, because the Lord has to like do some kind of stirring in your heart to like where you feel compelled to take the time to sit down to write these words over coffee or whatever, and to just put in the work. And as well as I do, like it's a hard thing to write a book. It is very hard. And so why do you feel like this message is important for people?
It's kind of what I just talked about. It's extending the olive branch of trust again. Trusting humans, trusting the good in humanity, and as God's creation, not as us versus them, not as you vote this way, I vote this way, I believe this, you believe that, my translation's right, your translation. This book is kind of saying like, I don't know about all of that, but here's what I know, like here's the connector in being human. And everybody goes through chaos. And everybody is being transformed into somebody. And that I believe God sees us through that process. And so to put it out there was worth it. It feels very vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult for me even promoting it or being on podcasts. 'Cause I'm like, I was being obedient and I don't want to do anything else. So
and I put it in a book.
Yeah,
that's
right. Here's the book. Don't talk to me about it.
You read that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yep.
So, but that's the theme. It's the vulnerability. It's even a self exercise for me. And like believing in what I've written and what I've experienced. So yeah.
Okay, I have to ask, because I've really enjoyed the writing process. Did you? I mean, did you genuinely enjoy it and like get to like experience a different way of creating like with God? Because it's a very vulnerable thing of like, we can try, I don't know how many times I've like sat down and be like, oh, this is it. And like, there's nothing. Yeah. Like, I don't know. How did that process just go for you?
It's kind of a unique process because it was kind of like a personal journal, prayer journal of sorts. But I found it was interesting to take what I had previously written and then write who I am, like as I am now in the season I am. It was interesting to write and then also not to look back and be like, oh, I don't think that anymore. Like I've grown. And so here's my bow. Here's what I
version.
learned. Yeah, here's the, I'm not in process anymore, FYI, And that's the most difficult part for me, actually. Like the writing, it usually flows. And I've come to peace with like, I only wrote 3 words because I usually have a toddler that's like, hey, you're up. I'm going to come down there too. So,
I'm like, Mom.
So being interrupted and just trusting that, I've grown in that. But the whole, I forgot what I was going to say.
It's okay.
There you go.
It's okay. I liked that answer.
Okay.
So it's good. I was curious. So I was like, I got to ask because you don't have a lot of friends who write books. So it's a very unique thing.
I feel like I have another one in me. I think we all have like 5 books in us.
Do.
At least. Yeah. And so I think this next one will be more of an intentional labor of love. Where it's a little less compiling and it's a little more like, I'm going to tell the story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Tell that narrative. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That gets me excited.
Yay.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So I looked through your book a little bit and I really loved the intentionality and maybe it's just how it happened, so I don't know, you can tell me either way, but I love that the sections are unlearning, unpacking, unfolding, and unlocked. And I was like, okay, I just need to look this up. But whenever, a word has un in front of it, it's just like, it's not, it's the opposite. And we know that.
Yeah.
But always the un words, I guess, they have that negative connotation. And so it's just interesting how all of these sections within your book, they share that common theme of openness or a fluid state of being. And so you can say was that intentional, that part, and then talk about that fluidness or the openness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This book would not be here as it is without my friend Kim Meyer, who we met years ago when we were both in ministry, but she's somebody, I think she's 20 years older than me, but she's just rock solid woman. Just, I wish I can't describe her because that's how cool she is. But she kind of honed into these, all these phrases, the unphrases, because she was like, it needs some kind of order.
Yeah.
There's not a distinct timeline. Here in 2018, I wrote this, and then 2020, I wrote this. And because there's not, she was like, put these into some sections.
Okay.
And so that was a great piece of advice and great exercise in me to do exactly what you're talking about. Promote the openness, but give it some sections and give it some, even just a framework for people to work from.
Some kind of guardrails of oh, this is all, it's this umbrella.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because there was a point where there's unlearning and all that stuff, but there was the unleash or unlock. There was a time where it's okay, it's time to start living this out, and I've changed because of this. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'm so glad I asked.
Yeah.
So sometimes this can just be a common thing of maybe just our natural tendency. When we get older, the older we get, we have, more years of life behind us, and we can just kind of grow into our routines.
Yeah.
And I do believe it does come down to some, a lot of it is that growth mindset instead of just being, content of just growing just the way that, on top of everything, and just kind of being stagnant. And so, with that, just sometimes we're less open to change. Why is it important to focus and reflect with God as we learn and grow?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. And I will say, even based on your statement, if I could, I think I actually would be the person that would just be stagnant and just be yes, I'm wise because I've lived. The end.
That's it. Which, there is a lot of truth even to that statement. Yes, people are very wise just because, you learn so much with each year.
Sure.
You do. You really do.
But I really don't, over the last 5 years, a big theme has been being what feels like being a beginner again. Yeah. And I don't get to know it all. And I don't have all these things. So there's more of a reliance that has to happen, the obedience has to happen. And I fight that just naturally. I want to just know and tell other people what to do. And God's been reframing that over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure I said that. What is the importance of documenting with God your growth? I journal because I can pick up a journal from when I was 23 and be look at this, look at you. In so many ways, I'm oh my gosh, you had no idea. But also honoring her because she was so excited to and so brash and
do all the things.
And so, I have to hold her also with just a tender heart because she's a part of me too. Yeah, so I think documenting it is just kind of seeing tangibly all of the versions of yourself you've been and how they're all informing you now, because we don't really get to cut off I used to be this person. Yeah. Because I'm no, that person still exists, but maybe there's been transformation. Yeah. Ideally there's transformation, right? Or growth. Yeah. So I just think it's important, even if it's not writing it down, take a picture. Have conversations with a friend. My notes app is my best friend. Just being this happened today, or I'm feeling this. Just to bring Because for me, a lot of my life can feel like it's just swirling around me. So when I sit down and do a voice to text notes app, because who types anymore? But just bringing that thought and feeling down to reality and sitting with it and holding it is really important. I think, to be able to, because everybody grows, like you said, becomes stagnant, but that's the intentional choice that, like, I'm going to remember this and remember how I've evolved and where, like what you said at the very beginning, like I see now very clearly where God was in that season when I didn't think he was anywhere.
Yeah.
You're like, I see now.
Yeah. And the purpose of why to go through that. Yeah. Even if it's hard. Yeah. And we'll get into that next. But I think it's interesting. There are a lot of people or leaders, or not even just disciplined people, but usually they are disciplined. They have journals, and like they do journal, and because it's such a helpful process and like to remember. And even as I think about just to not, forget about the gospel, to not be numb to it, like we have to have that practice of remembering. And it just makes sense of like, that's the call of why we even gather together, is to remember in the season when I don't feel like it, or like I really don't feel like I can do anything. It's to be encouraged. And I'm so glad that I think my mom bought me a journal in middle school and I took it to camp, and it's been so cool to see just like each version that God has had of myself, of Addie, like that, younger version, and I'm still young, but it's been so cool to see just like our relationship ebb and flow in a beautiful way. Like it's just this beautiful story that's unfolding, and he's writing, and to see how he is the author of the story, that it's even better than I thought. Like when I was writing things about going to college, and then it's like, oh my gosh, like college happened, and it's like, whoa. Yeah. And then it's out of college. I'm like, whoa, like what's happening? But it's so cool to see, like, I love what you said, like the physicalness of like, oh, I stamped this down in time. Yep. And like, I can see literally how like you're pouring out your heart, your soul to God, and he has been faithful. And I love just with journaling too, being a processor as well. Yes. It just makes sense where sometimes you just need to get it out on paper. But also I feel like it slows down time in a way where like you just make it more aware. And even if, you can forget about things, but then when I look back at the year, it's like, oh, I have these stacks, these books. Yep. And like just this time of like remembrance with the Lord. And with, anything can come and can happen. And like, I feel like those have been such safe places where the Lord's like, don't you forget, like, look at this and what I've been able to do in your life. And there's so many things like we have evidence of his grace and of, of him in our lives. But when he meets us so personally, like, it's hard to not forget and to be like, oh my gosh, like I wrote that how many years ago? And like, I needed it again today. Yep. And he knew that. Yeah. And it's so cool. We've had a lot of conversations on the podcast about remembering and journaling and stuff. Yes. So I was like, I had to hone in on that. Do it. It's so good. Yes. And I think it goes into this topic of joy and pain really well, and how we can hold those things together. And do you know Annie F. Downs? Yes. Okay, come on. I was like, you talked about like being a beginner again. Yep. I was like, yes. Yep. And then joy and pain. And I love that she says this so much of like, we can hold both sorrow and joy. Yeah. And the same thing, joy and pain. But I love this. I need to read this because I thought it was so good what you wrote. And so this quote is just at the beginning of your book in page 5, but I really love it. I'm inviting us to a more empowering narrative. I think pain is allowed because the redemption that comes from it is hard and holy. Pain is given because it helps us become more human and face our own frailty. Sometimes we think joy is on the other side of pain, but maybe it's meant to coexist with it. Maybe we get to hold both and let ourselves feel both. It's just so good. I just want to know more of your thoughts about that.
It's funny because I'm like, that's good.
It is good. And you're like, what?
But that's kind of an example of what happens when I write. Like, I feel like stuff like that comes out of my brain, and I'm like, that is not like,
right?
like that's not full. It feels like something needed to be put on a page that I was maybe a vessel for. Yeah. And that, like I'm trying to work hard on not discrediting even my own experience.
Right. Yeah.
But that felt like a big partnership moment because that's exactly, I feel like why, I don't want to say why pain exists. That's too big, and that's a whole different podcast and conversation.
Yes, it very much is. It is.
But as far as like what we do with pain, like I feel like Christian upbringing kind of revolves around like, yes, you will suffer, but try to make sure you don't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's
like, true, though.
Right?
Yeah.
So then when you encounter it or something even happens to you, like usually like I can handle the pain that comes with my choices, right? I can own that.
Your consequences.
But when something happens to you, it's a different level of pain.
Yeah.
And so, but that pain doesn't mean that any other emotion can't exist with it or any other experience can't exist. And I think that's what's been odd and cool about just getting older is seeing with that like hindsight and seeing with that foresight and being like, yes, I am really exhausted in the season I'm in, but that does not mean that the work isn't good, or what have you. Yeah. Joy and pain. And joy in the sense where, do you like Brene Brown?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I was like, you did mention that. And
yes.
I was like, I know her. Yes.
Love it, because she talks about joy being the most vulnerable emotion to feel and to have.
Yeah.
Just being exuberant and happy with your life. I think that's very vulnerable.
That's true.
I really do.
I don't know if I've really thought about it in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a vulnerable thing, but if you look at like the rest of the world, it's hard to find joy.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can then feel guilty about it too. Yeah. It's just interesting. I mean, it is interesting, especially if you are a person who has like a positive outlook, or like not just, toxic positivity, but with like the Lord, and it's like there is purpose and there is mercy, there's grace for every day. Right. And there's good. Like I love She Reads Truth too, and like their thing is beauty, goodness, and truth. Yeah. And that can be found in every day, even if it's hard. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. I gotta think about that more.
But I think, if you share something joyful, people are like, must be nice.
Yeah.
You feel like it's kind of like this separator. Yeah. And where suffering feels like more of a connector these days and always. And it's meant to be, because we're very vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I feel even just like friendships that I've had in the last 2 years more have taught me like, you better let us celebrate with you when things are really awesome.
Yeah.
And we're also going to be here when you hit the floor. Really yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I love that though. I mean, like that is what a true friend does. Like when you have like that close circle of people, and it is hard because not a lot of people have those people to go to, or just even a lot of friends, and then starting over, all of that process. It's hard, and it can be messy, and we don't like to talk about it. And but I think I have found like even through all those things, if we wouldn't choose it, if it happened to us, there's still good in it. But it does make sense even more if you have those people like I want to celebrate my friends really well. If like something great, or like God answered, huge thing, or entering into a new season. And like He gives us that gift of like friendship and that deep joy to be able to walk with one another. It's just a model like of what He does for us. Like He walks with us in the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and like and the lowest of lows. Yep. Which is so beautiful. Yeah.
So beautiful. I love it.
It's good. Okay, so we're gonna go to our final thoughts. Okay. So I really loved our conversation and just this process of these conversations and these honest ones, because I feel like that is a lot of my relationship with the Lord. But sometimes people don't understand that, or it takes a long time to develop that secret place, and it's just like how does that happen? And so, like, what encouragement would you give someone, if our friends are listening, if they just wanted to start these types of conversations with God, just like, really practically, like, what can they do today?
Good question. So much of journaling, we'll take journaling, for example. It's not the only way to connect with God, but I know that it's a very powerful one. And it's my experience. It's my chosen connector, I guess. I would say to just start and for me, there was a lot of removing the don'ts before. Like, okay, I don't have to get up early every morning to journal.
Yeah.
Even though that's what everybody does, I don't have to do that. I can journal at 11 p.m. at night if I want to.
If you want to.
I can journal over my lunch, just kind of opening yourself up that there's not a right way to do this and that God's not interested in a right way to do this. He's just interested in connecting with you. So if I would say to open yourself up and just kind of feel what comes naturally as far as your connection point. Sipping your coffee, you don't even have to write anything down.
Yeah.
Find your pauses, find your 5 seconds, a deep breath or two. I believe that all of those are as powerful as sitting down for an hour journaling. And I've learned that too, because, in ministry, it was my secret place to be able to function and lead worship on a Sunday. But then I had a baby, and then that same place, it became complicated.
Yeah.
And so my time with God had to be whenever I could get it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I couldn't clean myself up for it either, so just open up your awareness to the things that you love and the things that God might want to be connecting with you in that are already in your life.
Yeah.
They're already in your life. He'll tell you if he wants to bring something new or for you to remove something, but just choose an awareness is my advice, I would say.
I love that. I feel like it's a question maybe like in a small group where like everyone has answered. It's like, oh, how do you best connect with God?
Yeah.
Like, oh, nature or I don't know what that, because that's one of mine, or journaling or prayer or I don't know, maybe it's just through scripture. Oh yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
So there's all these different types and pockets and different things. It is cool how like God can use each one of them, but there is one that is specific like for you. That is for me, for you. Like I love that he has created us all so uniquely that he wants to find a way that's best for his kid. I mean, like the way that you talk to your daughter to understand her, like you're like, you're going to get on her level and be like, okay, like tell me, tell me what you want or what do you need.
Please tell me what you want.
And like, that's what the Lord does. He gets low with us to come near to us. And I love that you said like, it doesn't have to look a certain way. I mean, I don't know why this example is coming to my head, but I remember like I did a couple like retreat things, like solo retreats. And one of my things is I love being outside, like I said, and hammocking. And it was the coolest thing. So maybe that's why I'm supposed to share it. But I set up my hammock and then I think I was reading a little bit, but I was like, Lord, like this is just so beautiful and so peaceful. I was like, and I was really tired, I think from that week or whatever. And I was like, it would just be so great to take a nap and then be able to read. And to wake up like before dinner time and like no joke, I fell asleep and then I woke up and it wasn't like super dark out and being by yourself, you're like, oh, but like the Lord, he gave me that time. And like sometimes that's the most beautiful time just to rest in God's presence. Maybe it is a nap, which those are good. Or it's just like in your car in silence. Like I love that it can look like anything.
Anyway.
And when you have more time for it, then you have more time. And when you, if you only have 5 minutes, that's all you have.
Yeah.
And he can meet us in the in-between.
Oh, for sure.
And that is like, I feel like what this whole thing is. And I love it so much.
The whole dang thing. Yep.
Whole dang thing. I love it so much. So good. So, Becki, I'm so glad that you said yes.
Me too.
Got to become your new friend. Just thank you for your willingness and just for writing this book. I know that's a huge thing. And just for being on our podcast today and getting to have so much more friends.
Yes. Yeah. So many more friends. I'm very grateful. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And so if people want to continue following you, what you're doing, where can they go?
Man, you can go to Becki Jean Graves on Facebook or Instagram. I do have a website that'll lead you there too. But it's Becki with an I. Yes. And Jean like the blue jean.
Yes, jeans. Yes, that's
Grave
true.
like Graves.
I love that.
No, just kidding.
That's awesome.
Oh, okay.
Well, again, thank you, Becki, so much.
No problem.
And thank you, friends, for listening. And I pray that you have a wonderful week and continue carrying the gentle love of Jesus wherever you go.